Hey there, welcome to the latest edition of The Gray Area, and boy, oh boy, coffee just tastes better this morning. The air's a little cleaner. I don't care that I'm sleep deprived, and I don't imagine that many people do either. As I record this here on a Tuesday morning, coming off an absolutely massive win for the Lions as they take care of the Ravens in Baltimore in, an unlikely win, considering nobody was picking them, including the two official pickers right here on the Detroit Lions podcast. That Ravens team has been an absolute nightmare for the Lions since pretty much their entry into the league. The Lions now 2-6 as opposed to 1-6 against the Ravens, and they finally get their first win in Baltimore against Lamar Jackson in convincing fashion. A lot to get to in this episode of the show, including the fact that this could be the narrative change. This could be the game that finally forces some people's hands and makes it so that they have to stop telling themselves a story about the 2025 Lions that just isn't true. The folks at Detroit Lions PR, we'll do a deep dive into what they were doing last night. They earned their morning coffee and certainly earned their overtime hours as they were up late doing that good work. The other thing that I want to talk about this morning or this evening or whenever you're hearing this is that the best news is that the Lions have yet to play their best ball, even though they are sitting here at 2-1 with an incredibly impressive win in Week 3 against Baltimore. Starting things off with what we learned after last night's win in Baltimore is that the Detroit Lions are going to have something to say about who the best team in football is this season, right now, even with all of the chatter that happened in the beginning of the year and throughout the offseason. And more on the narratives here in just a little bit. But the Lions are going to have something to say about who goes where in the playoffs, who wins the division in the North, and a bunch of other things. There's too much talent on this team, and they are too well coached, and they are too cohesive, and the culture is too strong for this squad to not have something to say. And I think everybody now understands that, or they should, after that really impressive win in Baltimore. Another thing we learned about this year's Lions team is that they can beat you in different ways. Jared Goff mentioned it in his post-game press conference. It was an important thing for Dan Campbell to mention. They want to be able to beat you a number of different ways because, well, that's what the best teams do. Last week, 334 yards through the air, 5 touchdowns. This week, 224 yards on the ground and 4 touchdowns. The offense is a thing of beauty when it's running at peak efficiency. And right now it is. Speaking of that, another thing I think we've learned officially, and the completely unnecessary inclusion of Stephen A. Smith in the pregame show drove this home. Jared Goff is not going to get his respect until he does it on the biggest stage sometime in February, because that guy is balling out. Another 20 for 28 day, wicked efficient, no turnovers, taking care of the ball, making sure that his playmakers get chances to make plays, and being there in a big moment. That throw to Amon-Ra St. Brown on 4th down was his best throw of the game. It was his most important throw of the game. There are only a handful of guys in the league that would even be trusted to attempt that throw, much less make it and make it as nicely as it did. It was a perfect toss. Amon-Ra St. Brown did what he does, and the whole offense kept on going. Jared Goff has been absolutely nails at the helm of this thing, but the conversation about him isn't going to turn until it's on that biggest, brightest stage. He's reached that point now where people take him for granted, and his performances throughout the regular season aren't going to mean as much. There's some similarities there with Lamar Jackson. I know ESPN donated a lot of oxygen to that conversation and how similar he is to Peyton Manning through this point in his career and how he's got to get over that hump and stop being a yeah, but kind of a guy. Well, Jared Goff is there too, because he's just playing too well. Out of the blocks, all of the nonsense about the offensive coordinators, and if it's not Ben Johnson or Sean McVay, then he can't win. And he was awesome last night. So he's just going to have to keep chugging right along, and I'm sure he's aware of it, and I'm sure he doesn't give a crap about any of that. But the conversation on him, it isn't going to change until such a time as he does it in February in a Super Bowl under those brightest lights. Another thing we learned last night is Kelvin Shepard's version of this of the Lions defense takes a little time to get going. This is the third straight game they've allowed an opening drive touchdown. Would be nice if they could start a little warmer. They get much better as the game grinds on. Ask Lamar Jackson and those 7 sacks that he took last night. As they dialed up the pressure as the game progressed, they got better and better and better and better. But starting slow has become kind of a thing through 3 weeks. They've allowed 3 straight teams to just go down the field, including the Bears, and get opening touchdowns. Then they make adjustments. Then they dial it in, and they crank up the pressure as the game goes on. There's a good news, bad news thing there, and we will get to that a little bit later in the show with regards to Kelvin specifically. Another thing we learned last night, and I found this out the hard way when I looked at who was trending on Twitter during the game, Terrion Arnold, I hope, threw his phone into the Inner Harbor in Baltimore before he got on the team plane. Because, my God, he was one of the trending items there on the Twitter machine, and it was bad. He was mentioned in the Slack, and it was bad. He even got some stuff on the TikTok and Instagram, and there are some people that may or may not be related to some of his teammates who had things to say. Terrion Arnold should throw his phone into the water, change his number, and just stay off of anything with a little magnifying glass where you can search your name. It wasn't good news. I'm not convinced he played as poorly as the trending topics would have indicated, but he definitely had another rough night. He is on the highlight reels for a third straight week in bad spots, and they even made a point of highlighting him in the pregame show and how he has been targeted by quarterbacks throughout the first 3 weeks. It happened again last night early in the game, got better as the game went on. I think Chris made a really good point on the postgame show about Terrion Arnold and about how his game progressed. Sometimes when you're not talking about him at all, it's because he's doing his job. And those 7 sacks don't just happen, and we'll get into that here in just a little bit. But man, oh man, if I'm Terrion Arnold or anyone who cares about Terrion Arnold, take his phone away. Keep him out of there, because it's not good. It just wasn't fun. And finally, what we've learned, and part of the narrative change that I think will take place now, or can start to take place now, is that this is Dan Campbell's team. I think Lions fans knew this all along. It has been a constant source of frustration for me to see the national casuals consistently, repeatedly, incessantly underestimate the ability of Dan Campbell to be a football coach. He's this muscle-bound meathead cheerleader in the eyes of far too many of the national punditry, and he is proving that he is not only an excellent motivator and a culture builder, but one hell of a football coach, and pretty good at hiring. A lot of stories about attrition, a lot of stories about what was lost. Dan Campbell was worried about what was gained, and he's got this team playing pretty well. They were coached up last night for what should have been, or what could have been, an impossible task of dealing with Lamar Jackson, something they have failed at before, something every team fails at. That guy's a cheat code, and he had his team ready to go. His coaches had their units ready to go. This is Dan Campbell's team, and he is going to have to be talked about in a different light moving forward now that you know that the allure and the cult of the magic play caller might have been a misplaced notion. Speaking of all of that, could this finally be the game that changes the national narrative around the Lions? Not that games are won and lost by narratives. Who gives a crap? I get that. There's nobody in Connecticut that has ever won a game for the Lions. In fact, there's one guy in Connecticut who's lost a handful of them and made himself look ridiculous in the process. That's neither here nor there. This conversation about this team has got to start to change now, and an emphatic statement against the Baltimore Ravens is a good way to jumpstart that. All offseason, it was about the lost coaches. It was about the brain drain. It was about players coming back from injury and not being up to speed. It was about whether or not Dan Campbell was just an orangutan in a t-shirt on the sideline. And not enough was made about what remained. And what remained was Dan M. effing Campbell. The man's worked his way up to that echelon of coaches. You're going to have to change the way we talk about Dan Campbell. He's not just a cartoon anymore. Now, he's still a cartoon, all right? Still looks like a pro wrestler. All of the South Park memes about him wheelbarrowing his sack around Ford Field they're still there. They're still going to be funny. They're still not wrong. The man goes for it on fourth down like it's his job. But Dan Campbell's we need to talk about him differently. The Nationals need to talk about him differently. He is proving people wrong again for a fourth straight year. You go from 3 wins to 9 wins to 12 wins to 15 wins with 875 players on your defense on the injured list, and you come in and there's still the lingering doubts because it was all somebody else's doing. It was somebody else's job. It wasn't. It was Dan Campbell. The other thing that remains, because Dan Campbell's there, is the culture. Players that know how to rebound from that week 1 loss in Green Bay, players that know how to hold themselves accountable, players that know how to get ready, players that were incessantly henpecked about what it was like to go to Baltimore in 2023 and get drilled in that 38-6 debacle. We all remember that game, and none of the players were allowed to forget it because it was on the lips of every reporter in Allen Park all week long. The culture remained. Those really good players, a whole bunch of those really good players also remained. I mentioned the stats. Last week, you win through the air with 5 touchdowns. This week, it's on the ground with 4 touchdowns. You've got maybe the best running back duo in the league. They are starting to put up some numbers that put them in really, really rare space with David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs. Amon-Ra St. Brown, one of the best receivers in the league. Jamison Williams might be the fastest guy in the league. And then you've got depth pieces, and I put that in quotes because Sam Laporta is a star on most other teams. He's a piece on this one because of the way that this team is put together and all of the talent that they have. Not enough got talked about there. Now they've gone into Baltimore and gotten a big win. The week 1 loss to Green Bay supercharged the negativity. It served as proof, positive, and proof of concept that the Lions just can't do it anymore, that they're going to fall down a peg, that they're not the same team, and Ben Johnson was the linchpin to the entire operation, and that's BS, and we all know. The Ravens were the odds-on favorite for a Super Bowl. I mean, this team is the one that Vegas is telling everybody is the best team in the league with maybe the best player in the league in Lamar Jackson. And you just go in and beat that team, that the league's best, and did so decisively, and did so your way. It wasn't a fluke. It wasn't a blocked field goal. It wasn't a special teams gaffe. This was Lions football played by this squad, and they beat the best. It wasn't the Bears. A lot of folks wanted so badly to dismiss that week 2 win and the bounce back from Green Bay because it was just Chicago and they looked hapless and they are not on the same level as Detroit. Well, the Ravens are supposed to be a level above, and it didn't happen last night. The conversation's already flipping at the worldwide leader. You're starting to see people come around and author articles about the fact that Dan Campbell is proving that he can weather change, that he has built this thing correctly. They keep doubting this man, and they keep being wrong. And last night has got to put some doubt in everybody's mind. It'll be something to see the shouty shows and just exactly how they address this and what they have to say now that you went out and you dominate Lamar Jackson and you sack the man 7 times and you take it to him offensively and you grind that Baltimore Ravens defense down in their own barn. All of those things have got to change the conversation about the Lions moving forward, especially now with the game against the Browns where they're favored by 8.5. Big line. I know it's the Browns. I get it. But that's a big line. And they've still got to take care of business. They go out there and trip, just ask Green Bay. If they go out there and trip and stumble against a lesser team, a lot of this comes back. So up to Dan Campbell and all of those players in that locker room to keep the focus. And then finally, what's actually out there as far as a narrative changer, the Lions are now set up for a much hotter start than even I thought possible. You looked at that schedule, so much was made of that. Again, narratives over numbers. You've got this nightmare first place schedule, all of these contending teams, the AFC North, all of it was laid out and laid bare and was supposed to be doom in the beginning of the season. Road trips to Kansas City and Baltimore and Cincinnati and Green Bay. Well, None of those things look quite as daunting now. At 2-1, a game against the Browns where you can take care of business. You got a game against the Bengals where there is no Joe Burrow. And that is not the same Bengals squad that we were talking about in July and August when the schedule was white hot on all of the headline shows. So the Lions have an opportunity in the first quarter of this season to get off to a much hotter start, to set themselves up. And that's going to be big because a little bit later on this episode of the show, we'll talk about one of the best pieces of news for this team, and that is the fact that they are going to continue to get better. I also want to take a moment and acknowledge the good people at the Detroit Lions PR department because, man, oh man, were they burning the midnight oil. Talked about it a ton on the post-game show with Chris, just all of the shocking numbers that came out of this game. Crazy numbers, tying the highest number of sacks against Lamar Jackson ever with 7, and he has struggled when they get over 5. Obviously, I think most quarterbacks would. I'm not sure why they bring that up, Lamar specifically. But we got to talk about all of this stuff over here. These guys, the only time in NFL history that a team has had 2 players log 250-plus scrimmage yards and 3 rushing TDs through the first 3 games of the season. That's some pretty rare company when you make a list now with the 1960 Browns and the 1958 Rams. David Montgomery, first player to rush for 150 yards and 2 TDs in a game since James Stewart in 2002. He's the first Lion to produce these numbers in a road game since Barry Sanders, 1997. Only times the Lions have produced at least 11 sacks through the first 3 games. It's happened 4 times in history. 2025, it was 15 years ago before that happened in 2010, 1997, and 1983. Looks like maybe Kelvin Shepard's onto something with generating some pass rush. Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery, each rushing for 2 touchdowns. The only other times Detroit has had 2 players rush for 2 TDs in the same game was November 15, 1936. So it's been a minute on that. It was Dutch Clark and Ernie Cadell. So Lions have topped 900 total net yards and 90 points over their last 2 games. The only other time they've produced 900-plus net yards and 90-plus points over any 2-game span was 1950. Ben Johnson was not the offensive coordinator in 1950. So perhaps there's a lesson to be learned there. And again, points to the Detroit Lions PR. Whose picture do they put there with the big offensive record? Yeah, John Morton. Just like with the pass rush questions, they throw Kelvin Shepard's name up there. They weren't done. Monty, Jahmyr Gibbs, and Amon-Ra St. Brown all had touchdowns in tonight's game. The 10th time each member of that trio has produced a TD in the same game. That extends an NFL record. 220-plus rushing yards and 4 TDs in a game for the first time since 1998. When we're going back to times when I was just out of college, I am an old man. They haven't played this well in a while. The Lions sacked the Ravens 7 times. That ties for the most sacks the Ravens have ever allowed in a single game. Oh, look at there's Al-Qadim Muhammad. I don't think that picture was a mistake either. 4 straight Monday Night Football games. That's the first time the Detroit Lions have ever done that. Going back to this is Dan Campbell's team. Dan Campbell set a franchise record last night as well. 12-2 in primetime games. When Lions get on the big stage and the lights are bright, under this Dan Campbell-led administration, they're pretty good. Aiden Hutchinson, franchise record, producing a QB hit in 18 straight games. Jahmyr Gibbs, 29 career rushing touchdowns, now ranks 4th all-time in Lions franchise history. He's just getting started. My man's not even on his 2nd contract yet. Only running backs in NFL history to lodge 500-plus scrimmage yards and 5 TDs through a player's first 4 career Monday Night Football games. Starting to get a little bit into the weeds on this one, but Jahmyr Gibbs pulled out a mark there. David Montgomery's 13th career 100 rushing yard game. Amon-Ra St. Brown produced his 37th career TD reception. That passes Marvin Jones on that list for the franchise. And points to the Lions PR team out there burning the midnight oil and staying up late, producing all of those numbers for a game that the math is going to be something to behold on this one for a long, long time. And just super cool to see the Lions come out and do what they did and do it emphatically against this team. And that brings me to the even better news. What could be better than winning a huge game on Monday night in Baltimore when absolutely no one picked Detroit and setting themselves up for a hot first month of the season with this new coaching staff? Well, it's the best news, and that is that the best is yet to come. This team still has some things to iron out. There will be moments for the folks that comb through the All-22 where they're going to wonder what Jack Campbell was doing. He's still struggling a little bit with the blitz game and trying to figure that out. There are still times where that back seven, a little lost. Mentioned Terrion Arnold, needs to stay away from his phone, and all the online experts and the armchair general managers and head coaches out there. That secondary needs to be better. Brian Branch needs to stop taking a 15-yard penalty every game in crucial moments. He also needs to wrap up that guy at the very end of the game so they don't convert on a 3rd and 26. All of these are nitpicks because they came in a win, which is the best possible news for this week. The better news is that this team is going to get better. That young interior offensive line that Troy Aikman would not shut up about, I think he mentioned it about 100 times, that's a young interior O-line with the guards there on either side of Graham Glasgow. They are going to continue to get better. As they get a taste of success now on the road in a hostile environment against a very good team, they are going to continue to improve. Aiden Hutchinson, even with his franchise record last night with that 18th career game with a quarterback hit, is still rounding back into form. You've seen it the last 2 weeks. He's gotten better as the game has worn on. He is going to get better as this season wears on and he gets some miles on the tires and gets his legs underneath him. He is going to continue to improve. Speaking of that defense, Josh Paschal and Aleem McNeil haven't played a snap. There are reinforcements on the way in the weeks to come. That is going to make a big difference on the interior of that line when Aleem McNeil is back there and adds to that rotation, and all of the guys that are making plays now don't have to make them as often. You keep guys fresh. You put a star playmaker in the middle to go with everything else that defensive line was able to dial up last night and the week before, and this team is going to improve. Mentioned the back seven. They got work to do back there in that secondary. The safeties have looked out of place. And again, I don't know what the play call is, but I know when you're nowhere near a wide open receiver and he got behind the corners and the linebackers and the safeties are still another 15 yards off of him, that somebody busted something. And it's happened a couple of times this year. They need to tighten up. Kelvin Shepard is only in his 3rd game as defensive coordinator. John Morton is only in his 3rd game as an offensive coordinator. Both of those guys are going to continue to improve. You're going to see improvements with game flow and all of the things that go into their preparation. There's no way to learn this except to do it. The only way is through. And this coaching staff, much maligned for being new and unproven, is learning. Every week they're learning, and they're succeeding in the last 2, none bigger than this week in Baltimore, and they are going to continue to improve. So you've got all this stuff that's going right for the Lions. You got 2 back-to-back great games. You got a game in which you're heavily favored, back at home in front of what'll be a nutso crowd, playing those boys from the Mistake by the Lake. And all of that is going to get better. There are tacit line items, players that are coming into form, players that are going to come back from injury. The often rumored, seldom seen Marcus Davenport may in fact rejoin the team a month from now as he is on his annual sojourn off to the IR. The team's going to get better. The team's going to continue to gel. The coaches will get better. They've got to fix that penalty issue. This game was not without its hiccups, but you'll take it. You get a huge win and set yourself up. You'll take every one of those hiccups as the Lions continue to move through the season. Thank you so much for spending some time. A reminder, join the DLP Slack. I'd appreciate it if you followed me on all of the socials. At the Michael Gray is the place to find me. All the places, Bluesky and the Twitter and Instagram and everywhere, Reddit, Facebook, all of it. It's all the same. But barring that, if you'd like to stay out of the open sewer of social media, I cannot recommend the DLP Slack enough. It gets a little contentious in there. Tempers run a little hot during game times, but that's to be expected. Passionate fans, a lot of knowledge. And really, really good conversations that stay out of the ditches that you sometimes find yourself in with social media. And like I said, Terrion Arnold, stay away from social media. There's a handful of guys that should just skip it. if they're not already, they should just skip it for the next couple of days and bask in this big, big win and the fact that the Lions are now set up for a nice little run through the first quarter of the season. Got to take care of business against Cleveland. Got to take advantage of a wounded Cincinnati team, and then got to get ready for another Monday night game against a pretty good Buccaneers team that's been a headache for this squad in the past. So got lots of work to do, but man, they have set themselves up nicely. I did not expect to be doing this show today, did not expect to be coming off a big win against Baltimore. Not many people did. And we all learned a valuable lesson about underestimating this team this week, myself included. Don't count out Dan Campbell and his boys because they're going to get after it. Please follow, like, and subscribe to the channel. I know everybody says that, but it's literally how we get to do these things and how we keep the lights on around here. We got folks running around backstage, mostly Chris and Ash, that are doing all the really hard work while I run my mouth. And Risden gets all of the other stuff. And Bish and Brown are doing their thing. Got to keep all of that going. So please be a part of that community. Join us on Slack, like the channel, and I'll see you next week.